You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Zscaler, the leader in cloud security. Cyber attackers are using AI in creative ways to compromise users and breach organizations. In a security landscape where you must fight AI with AI, the best AI protection comes from having the best data. Zscaler has extended its zero-trust architecture with powerful AI engines that are trained and tuned by 500 trillion daily signals. Learn more about Zscaler Zero Trust Plus AI to prevent ransomware and AI attacks. Experience your world secured. Visit zscaler.com/zerotrustai.
My name is Geoff White, and I'm an investigative journalist covering technology. We're quite geeky, my brother and I. You know, we had a ZX Spectrum, which I've still got. I'm actually looking at the ZX Spectrum at the moment. So clearly we were a bit geeky as youngsters. I sort of got interested in journalism, I guess, a little bit at university. I did work experience at a couple of newspapers, and I'm not quite sure what it was. I think, like a lot of people, I had the idea that journalism was quite glamorous. It is and it isn't, you know, we'll maybe come on to that later, but yeah, there were some glamorous bits, I suppose, and some less glamorous bits. But the heart of it all is communication, is basically taking stuff that's known about by a certain group of people and communicating it to the general public, and just, you know, being able to use words to craft a story to get something over to people and get their attention and say, look, this is important, you should read this. I think that was what was the heart of my attraction to it. I started on local newspapers, which, you know, is the classic. I don't know whether you have these in the US to the same extent, but the kind of local news, you know, cat stuck up tree kind of thing. Went on to magazines and then started doing bits of radio and then television. And I kind of stumbled into the technology beat. There was a reporter at the time who was doing technology, and he needed a producer to work with him. So in television, you often have a reporter and a producer. So the reporter is on camera and the producer works behind the scenes. And I'd actually worked for an internet advertising company before that. So, and I'd built my own website lovingly in HTML. I'd handcrafted my website in HTML. So I sort of knew which end of a computer was which. And so the bosses saw that, and so we paired up. And to be honest, since then, I haven't looked back. That's been my career really for the past 10 or 12 years. Honestly, the favourite part is being a real pain in the ass for people who believe that their power and their money exempts them from having people being a pain in their ass. And I have to say, with some of the technology companies, you know, when you phone them up and you say, look, I've discovered this particular thing, their reaction sometimes is one of almost bewilderment that you're accusing them of anything other than saving the world. The problem is when you sort of point out the unpleasant truth, which is, well, hang on, you've got a massive problem with X, you know, with monopoly practices or with child protection or whatever, it sort of bursts their bubble a bit. And it's like, oh, we're not saving the world, we've got issues. So, you know, that's the bit that I really enjoy, almost, is popping that bubble and saying, no, you're no better than anybody else, mate. I've told you about a problem and now you have to fix it. There's a really interesting crossover between techies who are turning to journalism and journalists who are turning to tech, and that the stream is going both ways, a bit of a revolving door. I mean, I think for techies who are getting into journalism, the wonderful thing about now is that the old model of the sort of gatekeepers, where you had to get a job as a journalist on a newspaper because only newspapers could afford the printing presses, and you had to get a job on the BBC because only they had the radio licenses. All that's gone. You know, you can start blogging and you can start making videos on YouTube and you can release your own podcast. This is the wonderful thing. If you're interested in getting into journalism, you just start. You don't need somebody to give you, you know, the keys to the office. And you can practice, you know, if you're blogging and if you're making your own podcast, you can make those early mistakes. You can screw it up. You can listen back to it and think, oh, that wasn't very good. You've got a little grace period online to sort of practice your skills. For journalists getting into tech, we really have a job of work of taking quite complicated and quite advanced but important things about tech and making them clear to the public. There's quite a lot of tech security journalism I read where you get to the end of it and you think, well, that sounds very worrying, but what does it all amount to? A, what problem does this cause to me as a member of the public? And B, how can I fix it and make myself safe from it? So there's lessons on both sides. For journalists going into tech and techies going into journalism, there's I think, different approaches. One of the things about writing a book, which has been really interesting, is looking in the rearview mirror. Suddenly, all the pieces start to line up. There's this great quote from this book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The guy says, if you look ahead and forward in life, everything seems chaotic and you don't quite know where things are going. But if you look backwards, you can sort of trace a line through the dots. And if you extend that line forwards, that's probably where you're going to go. And I just found that really interesting, that looking back over cybercrime and cybersecurity that I've covered, all these things that I sort of at the time covered and then kind of went on to other things have all started to fall into place, as a timeline. The emergence of Bitcoin, covered it, wasn't sure about it, it turned out to be big. The dark web, again, it emerged, covered it, and then covered it a few more times, and then suddenly it turned out to be big. The personal data stories that we covered, I covered them, and then suddenly Cambridge Analytica comes out, and so suddenly in the book, all these pieces have lined up, and I can tell a story that actually feels like a narrative. It feels like it was, like a timeline. Whereas when I was going along covering it as a journalist, it felt like individual stories, popping out of the woodwork and me reacting desperately to them. One thing I really hope is that people think I was fighting for them. So for me, my sort of employer, if you like, is the public. My audience is the public. I really hope that when all's said and done, they look back and think, well, yeah, actually, he covered stories and broke stories that helped us, the public, who didn't have massive amounts of money and massive amounts of power and a huge lobbying campaign in political circles. Because that's for me, that's what journalism is all about. The people who buy our papers and read our, stories and listen to our podcasts and stuff, they're the rank and file public. That's who you're working for. So as long as they feel I did a good job for them, that'd be a good result for me.
Hi, everybody. It's Maria Varmazes here, your host over at T-Minus Space Daily, and sometimes a guest on Hacking Humans, too. We here at N2K Cyberwire work hard to bring you concise, intelligence-driven news and commentary, and we'd like to know how we're doing. Please take a few minutes to complete our audience survey and share your feedback to help us continue to grow and meet your needs. Visit cyberwire.com/survey. That's cyberwire.com/survey to get started. Thanks so much for your input as we reach for the stars. It means the universe to us.
The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.